The snow had been falling since midnight. It came down in thick, heavy curtains over the small town of Millbrook, Vermont. The kind of snow that muffles the world into a sacred silence. The kind that makes everything look clean and forgiving, even when nothing is. The streets were empty. The Christmas lights strung along the maple trees blinked red and green against the white dark, and the whole town looked like a greeting card that nobody had the heart to open. Inside Millbrook General Hospital, the maternity ward glowed warm and quiet. Most of the staff had been there since the evening shift, trading holiday stories over bad coffee and homemade cookies. Somebody's mother had sent in. The hallway smelled like pine. From a little plastic tree, someone had decorated with paper. Snowflakes at the nurse's station. It was Christmas morning, 8:47 a.m., and in room 114, a woman named Eleanor Calloway was about to meet her son. Eleanor had not slept in 31 hours. She was 28 years old, dark-haired and possessed of the kind of quiet strength that people often mistake for coldness until they see it break, and then they understand that it was never coldness at all, only the careful architecture of someone who had learned to carry unbearable things without letting them show. She had learned that 9 months ago, on March 14th. Her husband, Daniel Calloway, had been killed on a Tuesday afternoon on a highway outside of Boston, a tractor trailer running a red light. He never made it to the hospital. The paramedics told her later that it had been fast. They always say that, she thought, because fast is the only mercy they have left to give. Daniel had been 31 years old, a high school history teacher, a man who made coffee too, strong and laughed too loud at his own jokes and cried at the end of every war documentary he ever watched. He had known Eleanor was pregnant for exactly 11 days before he died. They had told nobody yet. They were still savoring it, that particular sweetness of a secret that belongs only to two people. After the funeral, Eleanor had sat alone in their kitchen for 3 days. She did not eat. She barely slept. She talked to him sometimes quietly, in the space where he used to stand by the stove making eggs on Sunday mornings. She told him she was scared. She told him she didn't know how to do this alone. She told him she was angry, furious. In fact, with the specific cruelty of a universe that would give her a child and take away the man she was supposed to raise it with in the same breath. Eventually she got up, because she had to. Because there was a life inside her that did not know about grief yet, and she was not going to be the one to teach it too soon. She moved back to Millbrook, where she had grown up. Her mother was there. Her childhood home, familiar streets that remembered her as something other than a widow. She survived the pregnancy the way she survived everything, quietly, stubbornly, one day at a time. The labor had been long and complicated. Eleanor had gone in on the evening of Christmas Eve, her mother, Patricia, gripping her hand in the passenger seat of an ancient Subaru that groaned through the snow, like it was doing everyone a personal favor. At the hospital, the contractions had been irregular for hours, the baby in no particular rush. It seemed, despite what Eleanor felt, was sufficient encouragement. By 3 a.m, everything changed. The delivery room filled with focused urgency. Dr. Miriam Park, small, precise, unflappable, talked. Eleanor threw it with the calm authority of someone who had seen every version of this moment hundreds of times and still treated each one like it was singular. And then, at 3:47 a.m. on Christmas morning, a voice entered the room. Small, furious, absolutely certain of its own importance. Eleanor's son. The nurse who placed him in Eleanor's arms was named Sandra Okafor. She was 53 years old, a 25-year veteran of the Millbrook maternity ward, and she had held more newborns than she could count. She knew the specific weight of them, the specific warmth, the way a brand new person smells like something that has no name in any language. Sandra had also known Daniel Calloway. He had been her nephew's high school history teacher. She had met him at a school fundraiser 4 years ago, a tall, lanky man with an easy smile and the particular sincerity of someone who actually meant it when he asked how you were doing. She had seen him around town a few times after that. When he died, she had gone to the funeral. She had not known Eleanor well enough to approach her, but she had recognized her, the woman in the front pew who sat with her spine perfectly straight, as if falling apart was something she had simply decided not to do. Sandra had not known Eleanor was pregnant. She had not put the connection together when the name appeared on the intake form. Calloway was not an uncommon name. She wrapped the baby carefully in a white blanket printed with small blue stars. She turned and walked the 3 steps to the bed, where Eleanor lay, exhausted and trembling, and open in the way that only the aftermath of birth and the aftermath of grief can make a person open. She placed the boy in his mother's arms, and Eleanor looked down at her son for the first time. The baby had stopped crying almost immediately upon contact with her chest. He squinted up at her in the particular unfocused way of the very newly born, adjusting to the strange, bright world he had just been delivered into. Eleanor's breath caught. She made a sound that was not quite a word, something between a gasp and a whisper, caught somewhere in the throat. Her eyes filled and then overflowed, the tears running silently down her face, and she made no move to wipe them away. Sandra was already stepping back to give her space when she glanced at the baby's face. She stopped. She stood very still for a moment in the warm, quiet room. She looked at the boy's eyes, already open, already that searching, ancient-seeming quality that newborns sometimes have, as if they are arriving from somewhere they half remember, and she felt something move through her chest that she would struggle to explain later. The shape of them, the particular shade, that warm amber brown that she had seen in a face across a crowded school gymnasium 4 years ago. The slight downward tilt at the outer corners that gave them a kind of gentle, earnest quality even in repose. They were Daniel Calloway's eyes, unmistakably, completely. Sandra had seen this before in her career. The uncanny inheritance, the way a parent's face surfaces in a child's, like a message written in a language only biology knows. She had never been moved by it the way she was moved by it now, standing in this room, watching this particular woman cry over this particular boy. Eleanor was speaking to him, softly, just barely above a whisper, the kind of words that are not meant to be heard by anyone other than the person they're meant for. "Hi," she said. "Hi, baby. I've got you. I've got you." She was crying without drama, without theatrics, the tears simply coming, the way rain simply comes, because that is what it does when the pressure has built long enough. "He has his father's eyes," Eleanor said suddenly. She wasn't speaking to Sandra. She wasn't speaking to her mother, who stood at the edge of the room with her hand pressed to her own mouth. She was speaking to the room itself, or to the memory that lived in it now. Sandra crossed back to her slowly. She stood at the bedside. "I knew his father," Sandra said quietly. "Not well, but I knew him." Eleanor looked up. Her eyes were red. Her face was open and wrecked and more present than Sandra had seen a face look in a very long time. "He was a good man," Sandra said. "I could tell even from a distance. The kind of good that's just in someone, not performed." Eleanor's chin trembled. She looked back down at the boy. "Yeah," she said softly. "That was him." They were quiet for a moment. The snow pressed against the window. Somewhere down the hall, someone else's baby was crying. The lights on the little plastic Christmas tree at the nurse's station blinked on and off, on and off. "Does he have a name?" Sandra asked. Eleanor had been thinking about this for months. She had a list. She had crossed things off and added things and crossed them off again. She had lain awake in the house on Maple Street and looked at the ceiling and thought about the weight of naming a person, especially a person who was coming into the world already carrying so much. She looked at her son, his amber eyes, his father's eyes, ancient and new all at once, taking in the world for the first time. "Daniel," she said. "His name is Daniel." Later, when the room had quieted and her mother had gone to get coffee and the baby was asleep, against her chest, Eleanor sat alone in the blue dark of the early morning. Outside the window, the snow had finally stopped. The sky was beginning to pale. At the edges, the first gray suggestion of Christmas dawn. The town of Millbrook sat under its white blanket. Still and peaceful, every sharp edge softened. Eleanor looked at her son. His tiny fist was closed around the collar of her hospital gown. His breathing was slow and even and profound in its certainty, the breathing of someone who has never had reason to doubt that they are safe. She thought about Daniel, her Daniel, the tall one, the one who cried at documentaries and made terrible coffee, and had 11 days with the knowledge that he was going to be a father. She thought about how grief is not something you move through and come out the other side of, like a tunnel. She knew that now. Grief is something you carry, but the carrying changes. It becomes less like a crushing weight and more like an object you've learned to hold, properly, close to the body, redistributed across the muscles that have grown strong enough for it. She thought she understood something now that she hadn't understood before. He didn't leave nothing, she thought. He left this exact weight in her arms, this exact face, these exact eyes, which were his eyes, which were looking up at her now, no longer unfocused. Or maybe she was just imagining it, with something that felt almost like recognition. "Merry Christmas," Eleanor Calloway whispered to her son. And for the first time in 9 months, she smiled. Really smiled. The kind that reaches the eyes, and meant it absolutely. Down the hall, Sandra Okafor poured herself a cup of terrible hospital coffee and stood at the window watching the Christmas dawn come up over Millbrook. She thought about the look on Eleanor's face when she first saw those eyes. She thought about the strange, precise, occasionally devastating way that love refuses to end. The way it finds its way forward through the people we leave behind, wearing their faces, carrying their particular way of seeing the world. She had delivered thousands of babies. She had never delivered a miracle before. Or maybe, she thought, watching the sun begin to break gold and clean over the snow-covered town, she had delivered one every single time. The pain passes, but the beauty remains. Pierre Auguste Renoir.